I want to explain very simple why HGIG is the best setting for HDR, why you should care about that if you're thinking and purchasing a TV for gaming, why you want that setting to be available on your TV. And let me start by showing you. Also, I'm going to talk about system level calibration because that is very relevant. System level calibration on the PC and the console, and why that is relevant for HGIG. So let me start by showing you how you can know the hours of your TV. Just go to settings, you go to general, and you go to devices, TV management, TV information. So then on TV information you will see the hours. So how long has your TV been on? That's curious, and the reason why I bring that up is because my TV has 718 hours. Okay, so that's all the experience I have. That's all the experience I have about TVs and what this is. But you don't need to be an expert to understand what is HGIG. And I see a lot of experts making such a big deal and making this so complicated, and it is so easy. So what HGIG is, tone mapping off. That's it. HGIG means tone mapping off. Means that we are telling the TV you do not need to do tone mapping because the signal is already in range. So we are getting a signal that it is that we can display, no problem. So don't do any tone mapping. So you have two ways of achieving that. So the game or the movie, but we're talking about games now. So the game can be mastered in 1,000, 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 nits, whatever the developers decide. So that signal needs to be in range so the TV can display. Otherwise, the TV has to do the tone mapping. So there are two ways you can achieve that. You can adjust the sliders on the game. So what that is going to do is the game is going to do the tone mapping. So the game has probably a chart, or it has that tone mapping already set up on the settings. So when we are telling the game maximum luminance 800 nits, mid-tones 180, the game is going to send that to the TV, so the TV doesn't have to do tone mapping. So the second option is system level calibration. So right now the PC doesn't have system level calibration. So what system level calibration is the system, so the console, doing the tone mapping. So the game is 10,000 nits, the console is going to put that signal in range. So that's what tone mapping is. It's putting that signal in range. So dynamic tone mapping off. Why is that so similar to HGIG? The only difference is on the highlights. Dynamic tone mapping off is basically the TV assuming the signal is like 4,000 nits. So the problem with dynamic tone mapping off is that there's no communication between the TV and the game. Okay, so the TV doesn't know, how bright is the image. The TV doesn't know the range. So the TV is going to assume the game is in 4,000 nits. So it's going to display very accurately, actually, almost the entire range, everything but the highlights. Why? Because the equivalent, if you do the tone mapping in 4,000 nits, the equivalent of those 4,000 nits on this TV is going to be 800. Okay, so the TV is only going to display with dynamic tone mapping off. The TV is only going to display those 800 nits if the signal sends 4,000. But if the game is never sending 4,000, the TV is never going to display that 800 nits. So as a consequence, if you have the game sliders already set, as a consequence, you will never get that big brightness. But the rest of the image is going to look very similar to HGIG. So That's it. It's as simple as that. You want to use HGIG because it's going to give you the best result. It's going to display accurately the picture because the game is doing the tone mapping for you. So the TV is displaying that accurately, or the system is doing the tone mapping and the TV is going to display that accurately. So let me talk about, this display is not bright enough for HDR and HGIG is too dark. So this display, it is not bright enough for HDR, of course not. That's why it has to do tone mapping. So a perfect display is for HDR is a 10,000 nits display because that's the absolute, that's the PQ, that's the end of the range. So we don't have that, and we're not gonna have that for a while on the consumer side. But this display, it is still going to do a very good job in displaying the shadow detail. Actually, it's gonna do a perfect job in displaying the shadow detail and the mid-tones. Okay, so you're not going to get those highlights, but the rest of the image is going to be accurate. So what I'm gonna tell you now is my understanding, and I might be wrong. But as far as I know, if you have a higher peak brightness on the highlights, you have to increase the mid-tones a little bit. So for example, if your display is 1000 nits, you are going to set that HGIG range 1000 for the maximum peak brightness, and for the mid-tones 200. Okay, and for me on this 800 nit display, what I do is 800 and 180 instead of 200. So by increasing the peak brightness of the highlights, you need to increase a little bit the mid-tones, and the reason is when we have a super bright object that is blinding us a little bit. So as a consequence, the mid-tones, we are not gonna be able to see it very well. It's just the way our eyes work. That perceived contrast is going to be affected. So having a 10,000 nit display is going to absolutely increase the mid-tones. But I don't think would be a lot more. And the reason is it would be eye-searing. It would be too much. So I have experience on this TV 400 nits full screen by going into the service menu and turning on module HDR. So that gives you full screen 400 nits and more. Okay, I think it's actually 500, but based in experts, classy, keep it classy. Basically, I think if I remember correctly, he said it was 400 nits. And I talk about his video, and I posted the link to his video on one of my videos before. So he's saying that turning module HDR on, which he doesn't recommend, and I don't recommend that either, it can give you full screen 400 nits, I think, if I remember correctly. If not, it's 500 nits. So I have experienced that on a game like Red Dead Redemption, for example. On the snow, you get that full screen. That's like 500 nits actually, based on my measurements, because actually the full screen is not white because you have the horses and other things, and that is eye-searing. Trust me, you don't want that. You don't want 1000 nits full screen. That is going to destroy your eyes. So a reference monitor right now, a 1000 nits reference monitor, that's like $30,000, can do 1000 nits full screen. I don't want that. So if the consumer displays get to that point, I'm not interested in that. I just don't want it. I actually like the limitation of this TV, which is going to dim the screen. So even if you turn off on the service menu TPC and GSR, this TV is still going to dim when it has a white object that is on a bigger percentage, that is covering a bigger percentage of the screen. So full screen, this TV is gonna do less than 200 nits. If you don't have that module HDR on, even on HDR, this is not gonna do more than 200 nits full screen, and that's already a lot. So the limitation of this TV in reducing that full screen brightness, I actually like it. I'm okay with that because I don't want any content to be able to damage my eyes, to destroy my eyes. So I'm okay with that. I like it, and I'm not interested in getting a brighter display. So yeah, that's my opinion. That's my take on some people thinking, oh, HGIG is too dark, bro. Disable TPC and GSR, bro. The TV is dimming too much. If you have that on and you're playing on HDR with HGIG, it's too dark. After you disable that, you will realize that it is good. It is good. It is visible. Of course, it can happen that a game doesn't do the tone mapping correctly. So when you adjust the sliders, the game has the mid-tones too low and it is too dark. That can definitely happen. But if the game does a good job with the tone mapping, you should be okay. You should be okay, and you should be able to see everything. That's it. Let me know if you have any questions. Again, I'm not an expert, but this is not difficult to understand. HGIG means tone mapping off because the signal is in range. The TV doesn't have to do any tone mapping, and it is the best option for gaming. And we don't have system level calibration on the PC, but most games, well, some games allow you to set up the sliders, so it doesn't matter. We are going to have that system level calibration on the PC soon. It's not going to be relevant unless the new games coming take advantage of that, which hopefully they do. But on the console, you do have that system level calibration, and there are some games that support that, not a lot of them. On the console, in my opinion, all games should support that and not have sliders, because the whole point of a console is that just turn on the game and you play it. You don't have to set up settings or none of that. That's for PC. So in my opinion, system level calibration should be for consoles, and every single game on PC should have the sliders to set up the HDR. Maybe on the console just have a mid-tones sliders in case that somebody is playing on a dark room or a bright room, just to get a little bit more brightness on the mid-tones. So yeah, that's my opinion. Let me know if you have any questions, and yeah.